Hi there. In this video, we will talk about the Uptycs Security Platform and its core capabilities around threat detection and visualization, particularly from the standpoint of a security analyst who has to maintain constant oversight on the alerts and events that are of critical significance to the security posture of the organization, and be able to make sense of the information that is presented through the dashboards and be able to take the necessary actions in a time-sensitive manner. So all of this really comes together only when we have a very solid threat detection model in place. And I will walk through the various techniques through which Uptycs can make a life of the security analyst a lot easier. The various types of detection that we employ here in the product are behavioral, contextual, IOC or indicators of compromise based, and advanced. Particularly in the behavioral side, we leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework, the tactics and techniques to identify potential threats. Some examples amongst many others are privileged escalation, for Linux, hijack execution, and Windows command shell. Also, you see the T codes for associated with them, and those are the MITRE codes for the techniques and the sub-techniques. The second important detection model is contextual, where we leverage the Yara rules that are used to scan the malwares and the various processes that are spawned by malwares. Also, the Uptycs platform comes out of box with a set of factory rules, Yara rules, that are synthesized by the threat research team. And then it's further enriched with intelligence from the top APT groups. The contextual detection examples that we'll be covering today are Mimikatz and CoinMiner. Mimikatz, as some of you may be familiar with, is a post-exploitation tool that's used to dump passwords from memory, whereas CoinMiner is used to mine digital currency. The third type of detection technique we use is IOC-based, which can be real-time or historical data to find if there were any IOCs, indicators of compromise, involved. And the threat source and the threat books, we will briefly touch on that also during the demo. We have a pre-curated list of indicators that the threat research team creates. And this is part of what we call the global threat intelligence of our global threat intelligence operations. And a lot of the intelligence also relates to leveraging the sandboxes in our labs, detonating malware, and identifying specific parameters related to those malwares. Some examples of IOC are bad domain and bad IP address. And finally, we have this category called advanced detection, where we correlate the system API calls, and this is more of a highly real-time based detection model. Examples being process hollowing and ransomware. In this particular video, we will not delve deep into advanced. We will create a separate video for that because it requires a lot of other steps and rigors, and it actually can be a video of its own. The next thing I want to briefly introduce is the activity flow and configuration elements. At the helm of all this is the event rules, right? The event rules that you would define, and we will get into that as well during our demo. And it's guided by Wizard. Also, it's important to note that the event rules ingest information that comes from the configuration topics. So I've included some of the configuration topics here. For example, Yara rules profile that provides information about the particular Yara rules that will be leveraged in terms of identifying a match, and therefore the event rule or the alert gets triggered accordingly. The threat sources are also captured through the configuration topics and is a key input to the event rules, as well as toolkit data and APT data. So some of these event rules can be flagged for alerting. Finally, the metadata information, the event and the alert metadata pipeline stores all the metadata information from which the alerts are selected and the alerts dashboard is populated. But very importantly, from this mix of alerts and events, we correlate to create the signals, the detection signals. Therefore, we take away the rigors of correlation from the analyst. Our platform does that for you, brings them all together, gives it a score, and then we show them in this dashboard. Now, I want to quickly pivot to the dashboard. This is the this is the menu bar on the left, and this item that I'm hovering on right now is the detections dashboard. And in this particular detections dashboard, I have actually selected this host. I've filtered based on this host name, which is Protect You Linux-detections, and it's a Linux host, as you can see here by the operating system name. And this particular host, we ran a simulation tool to simulate various threats and different types of suspicious behaviors. As a result, what you see on the screen are a set of detections coming out of that scenario, and the scores as well. You can see on the left-hand side. So I'll start with one of these high-scoring detections here, which is network sniffing tool launched to capture network traffic. Sounds very scary, of course. So let me get a little bit deeper into this. So the next step is to look at the signals here. And I can see here from the MITRE ATT&CK framework that, if you consider this as a heat map, so you see all these particular, the tactics and the techniques are all, it's pretty busy, meaning this particular detection has been correlated from a whole bunch of alerts and events that fall in various categories of tactics and techniques in the MITRE framework. As you can see here, the score is 10 out of 10. A lot of alerts and events here, 201 alerts and 500 events, 9 tactics and 30 techniques. And in particular, if I were to click on this, I can look at the particular, the modal form shows what this alert really means. It has a CV score associated with it. And you can see it's a privilege escalation going by the MITRE tactic. And then if I go down, I can see it's a sudo command that was executed, sudo edit command, as well as the login name. I can see the path and a whole bunch of other information pieces here. So having said that, I want to quickly look at the, and then likewise, we could look at this other technique, which is for the hijack execution, and this is part of this. Here has a high value as well. There's a bad malware situation going on. So there's a lot of activities that makes this highly suspicious, highly gives it a very high threat score. Likely code injection with a high hijack execution for Linux. And also in this case, you can see the command line, the login name, the binary, the process ID, and you can get into further, delve into more investigations. You can see the ancestral list as well, which is a chain of executables. And if I move to the detection graph, I should be able to see this as well. And I want to quickly, so having said that, I want to get into the other detection model, which is contextual. So that was behavioral, which was based on MITRE. Now the contextual, we will be relying mostly on the Yara rule, and therefore, the match on that particular malware or malicious process. And so there is, I want to swivel to this, I want to move to this Windows machine. And what we can see on this Windows machine is there's this toolkit going by the sign, the score being very high, 10. And I want to open this Yara rule match, which gave me, which is probably based on a Mimikatz that was found in terms of the rule. And then, as you can see here, if I double click, I can see a few more interesting attributes. I can see the process path, which points to rat.exe, process ID, the rule name being Uptycs Mimikatz, and we will get into the Mimikatz part very, in a few minutes. And also you can see the ancestral list. And likewise, there are other things as well, as has been detected. There's a credential dump that was detected through the MITRE model, the MITRE framework, and that is being shown here as well. So if I look at this information, also it's pointing to rat.exe, and that kind of actually makes this quite, gives me a greater deal of accuracy, degree of accuracy. So the third one, and if I look quickly at the detection graph, you can see a whole bunch of processes that are marked as severity, medium severity, and this one, which is highly critical, which was rat.exe, and therefore colored in red. And you can take a bunch of actions as well. Instantly, you can kill the process, pause, continue, carve a file, or you can scan for further diagnostics. And you can do likewise for each of these. I want to point to the toolkit here that was Mimikatz, and we also give you information, a little more details about what Mimikatz is, and we have a link that points to the MITRE read up on Mimikatz. So if I click on this, I want to open this in a new window. So that's the configurations menu. As you can see, all of these different topics. We are focusing on this third category here, data collection and the Yara profile. So if you go into Yara profiles, you would be able to see all the various Yara profiles here. A lot of these are custom Yara profiles that have been created. For example, this one, for example, is Linux malware, and somebody created this from the threat search team called Linux malware, which has a particular string, and it's kind of based on that. But we want to, in this particular scenario, I want to open up one of the factory Yara rules that comes shipped with the product, and that is called UPT_Intel Windows Yara rules. If I click on that, I want to look for Mimikatz with that we ran into, right? So let me do that. Yeah, if I do Mimi, so there it is, the Mimikatz Yara rule, where you can see what is the conditions, the strings here. The condition is at the bottom, the strings that should be matching here. So 5, if there's a match of 5 of these strings, then there's a match on the rule, and the rule gets triggered. So that's how you get there. Now the third piece of detection model is what we discussed was IOC based. So let's go to the IOC based detection. There's one called bad domain. So I want to focus a little bit on that. So bad domain, there's really just one element to the signal, and therefore the threat score is kind of in somewhere in the middle. And if I look at hang.gl, what I'm going to see is I click on the alert. I see more details related to the alert, and you see the hang.gl domain, and the domain has been translated into this IP address. So you get that information as well. And you get information on the phishing activity from this URL. And we want to look at the virus total as well to see how accurate this information is. And that takes me to the virus total website, which has hang.gl. and there are a couple of security vendors that have identified this to be malicious. So, so that being said, I want to conclude this with the last piece here, where I want to show you some of the threat sources. Again, we can get there through the configurations menu. So let me do that. If I were to go to the configurations menu here, back to the configurations menu, which has a bunch of topics. In this first category on the left, you see threat sources and threat profiles. So I want to particularly focus on threat sources. And the other thing I want to show you is the rules, the event rules, in terms of the MITRE techniques, or even for Yara. How do you really define these event rules, right? So I'll go to that in a bit. But the threat sources, I want to show you how they're listed out here. There's about 300 plus 327 threat sources to be specific. You can click on any one of them, and you can see what sort of where it gets this information from. In this particular case, Alpine 3.11 vulnerabilities. We get this from github.com Uptycs vulnerability DB releases, right? And you can also look at the various threat indicators associated with that particular threat source. So we'll list them here, and there's quite a lot, about 2,000, close to 3,000 threats. If you were to create your own threat source, you can also do that. What you can do is you can click create. You can go create a name, give it a name, and you have to choose a file. You can choose any file like this, for example. I'm not going to create one, but the file has to be created in a particular CSV format. You have this information here, as in, for example, the format could look like this: indicator, indicator type, category description, and expiration. And these are some of the values that I kind of assigned to these fields. So you can create a threat source like this. And the last part I wanted to show is if I were to go back to one of these alerts, well, one of these detections, I want to show you one of the events, how the events can trigger this. For example, here we have a likely code injection event going on. So how do you actually come across this event, right? Or even this alert here on the top, which is about local privilege escalation. So if I click on this on the modal window on the right that shows up for this alert, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I see the alert rule. So if I click on alert rule, it opens up this particular alert rule. But I want to also show you the event rule, because oftentimes you would want to start off with the event rules through the event builder, or what we call the event rule wizard. And in this case, this particular event was pre-created, was built out of box by the threat research team. But this is typically how it looks like. And one way to create your custom event is to clone one of these events. And if you want to clone, and you can change, make some little changes here and there, and you can get to create your custom events. For example, you need to put in some filters. You want to put in some filters. For example, command line contains this, or command line size is more than 10. You can put the filters there. You can map. You need to map. You want to create an event exception, you can do that. You want to create in the actual body of the event, you have to identify, for example, this event, your first process was selecting a table, right? In this case, the table we selected was process_events table. And corresponding to that table, there are certain fields or columns of the table that you would have to map to the metadata that comes out of the event, so that when, based on that mapping and the match, that you put in, you will get a set of results, right? That then creates, creates or triggers an alert. And in this final step here in the wizard, you would choose whether you want to create an alert or not, right? So as you can see, this is enabled. If you unselect, it gets disabled. So an event will be generated, but the alert will not be triggered based off of that event if you disable this or if you don't select this option. So that's how you would go about doing this. Again, you want to focus on the dashboard, the detections dashboard. You can look at the alerts, but at the end of the day, the detections dashboard brings all the different alerts to you in a very correlated fashion. So you don't have to do the hard work, but you also do get to run through each and every alert or event that relates to that detection with a high score. And you can get to the bottom of the problem and be able to take immediate and quick actions. Thank you very much, and I hope this was helpful. We will come up with more videos moving forward. Thank you.